43 to about 55 millimeters. Now, in order to visualize and assess the aortic root, ascending aorta, aortic arch, and the descending aorta, we need to have some TE views. There are about 4 to 5 views which are important for us. One is the mid-esophageal aortic valve long axis view. Second is the mid-esophageal ascending aortic short axis view and the long axis view. Descending aortic short and long axis view, and the upper esophageal aortic arch long and short axis view. Now we'll go to the images of these. This is actually the mid-esophageal ascending aortic long axis view, wherein you see the aortic root comprising of the aortic valve, the sinuses, sinotubular junction, and the proximal and the mid ascending aorta. Distal ascending aorta is not visible because it is a blind spot of transesophageal echo. Important for us to understand the proximal and the mid ascending aorta is we need to know the normal values of the annulus, the sinuses, the STJ, and the ascending aorta, because only then we will be able to understand whether the ascending aorta is aneurysmal or not. So we have to know the normal values of the diameters of this ascending aorta. Next, this is the mid-esophageal ascending aortic short axis and the long axis view. In the short axis, which is on the left-hand side, you will see the main pulmonary artery, and to the side of the main pulmonary artery, you see the aortic ascending aorta in the short axis, and the SVC to the left of the ascending aorta. Okay, above that we see the right pulmonary artery. On the right-hand side, with the same thing at 90 degrees, we see the ascending aortic long axis view, which comprises the proximal and the mid ascending aorta with the right pulmonary artery on the top. Okay, actually this is one of this long axis view is one of the important views to measure the diameter of the ascending aorta, actually in the mid section of the aorta. Depending on the measurement of this, we are able to classify whether the aorta, ascending aorta, is aneurysmal or not. Next is the descending aortic short axis and the long axis view. On the left is the descending aortic short axis view. Here also we can make out any intimal thickening is there, any mobile plaques are there, or you can see the intimal thickening which can measure. We can measure it in the short axis view or even in the long axis view. To the right is the long axis view. Then the upper esophageal aortic arch short axis and long axis view. In the short axis, we can see the aortic arch in the short axis view. And in fact, this is one of the important views to assess the origin of the arch vessels, whether be it the left subclavian artery, left common carotid artery, or the brachiocephalic artery. Now, one important point we need to remember is in this upper esophageal aortic arch short axis view, if we are able to visualize the pulmonary artery on the left hand side of the aortic arch, the branch which comes out from the aortic arch is usually the left common carotid artery. Okay. Now this view is very important because especially in dissection, we have to understand whether the intimal flap is involving the arch vessels or not. Suppose from this view, if you are able to rotate the probe anti-clockwise or towards the left, you will be seeing the origin of the left subclavian artery. And if you come back, we'll come to the position of the left common carotid artery. And if you come to the right or clockwise direction, then you'll be able to visualize the brachiocephalic artery. In the sense, what I'm trying to tell you is, in one view, we will be assessing the entire branches of the aortic arch, so that we'll be able to analyze. Actually, per se, nowadays, nobody tends to shift the patient if he patient comes to an emergency room with the dissection, which is an emergency. You don't need to take him for a CT scan or MRI. In fact, a transvaginal echo, which can be done and finished and accomplished within about, say, 3 to 5 minutes. And you can visualize to a very large extent the origin of the branches of the aortic arch. On the right hand side is the aortic arch long axis view, where we'll see the proximal may not be seen, the distal portion of the aortic arch. Now coming to some aortic diseases. So I'll be concentrating more on the atherosclerosis, aneurysms, and dissections involving the aorta. Now coming to atherosclerotic lesions. Now Royce et al. Have divided the ascending aorta or the entire aorta into some 6 zones. That is, zone 1 will be the proximal ascending aorta. Zone 2 is the mid ascending aorta. Distal ascending aorta and aortic arch, proximal aortic arch, are the blind spots, which is because of poor visibility, because they overlay the trachea. And distal aortic arch is zone 5, and the proximal descending aorta is the zone 6. Okay, so we need to know in which portion of these zones are there any lesions. Now, for example, if there are lesions in the zone 5 and zone 6. I mean to say, any plaques are there, suppose grade 5 plaques, then it becomes mandatory for us to visualize the or analyze the distal ascending aorta and the proximal aortic arch. If you don't see any lesions or grade 5 plaques in the zone 5 and zone 6, then it has been recommended that it is not necessary to visualize or analyze the distal ascending aorta and the proximal aortic arch. Okay. I hope I'm clear regarding this. Now, if you look at the grading of the atheromas present in the aorta, see, there are about 5 grades of atheroma. Grade 5 is the mobile atheroma, wherein the incidence of stroke is about 46.5% of the patients. You can see, if it is grade 2, it's about less than 3 millimeters, then the incidence is almost nil. Now, if you look at the how does a grade 5 atheroma cause an stroke, this is one of the videos which will show you, especially when we go on CPB and this aortic arch is cannulated before going on pump. Once the aortic cannula comes into place and we start the pump, you can see the flow of the blood hitting the mobile atheroma, and this is known as this sand blasting effect of the flow, wherein multiple emboli can occur and cause, and the morbidity and the mortality rate is definitely high. Hence, the requirement of assessing all the zones of the aorta. Now, first thing is transvisual echo can be used to identify and grade the atheromas, and by doing this, we are able to do some alteration in surgical procedure. How? What are the things? One is we can change the go over to femoral cannulation. You can alter the site of the aortic cross clamp if it is in the region of the aortic arch or the ascending aorta, or you can do alternate site for graft anastomosis, or you can do complete arterial revascularization in these patients. And in fact, we can avoid antegrade cardioplegia, and we can go on a retrograde cardioplegia to prevent any morbidities due to the atheromas. Now, this is one of the image. Like on the left side, you have the epiaortic image of the ascending aorta. You can see the green arrow pointing towards one of the grade 3 plaque, which is about less than 5 millimeters. On the right side, if you see, this is a mid-esophageal ascending aortic aortic valve long axis. You can see a mobile plaque there. This is a grade 5 atheroma. In fact, this was one of the patients who was scheduled for a MBR with the CABG. We in fact abandoned the procedure. We did only a CABG, total arterial revascularization, and the patient had come back for follow-up after about 2 years without any incidence of any stroke or anything. Now, this is in the descending aorta. I can see a mobile plaque here in the short axis view, and this is in the upper esophageal aortic arch long axis view. You can see a grade 4 plaque. It's about less than 5 millimeters. Okay. Coming to aneurysms, aortic aneurysms. Now, when do you say the aorta is aneurysmal in nature? The aorta, if it's dilated more than 50% of the normal diameter, normally it should be about 25 to 35 millimeters or 2.5 to 3.5 centimeters. And you say it is dilated if it varies between 3.7 to 5 centimeters. Okay. And it is aneurysmal if it is more than 5 centimeters. Okay. And you call it as a dissection if there is an intimal flap is present. Okay. Without the intimal flap, we would still term it as it is aneurysmal if it is dilated more than 5 centimeters or 50 millimeters. Okay. Now, the thoracic aortic aneurysms are divided into 3. You can have aortic aneurysms in the ascending aorta, the aortic arch, and the descending aorta. Or descending aortic aneurysms are also known as thoracoabdominal aneurysms. The aortic aneurysms can either be saccular or fusiform. Okay. Fusiform means basically they are uniform in shape with a symmetrical dilatation. Saccular aneurysm is there is localized outpouching of the aortic valve, and one of the reasons for that is degenerative, or it can be because of hypertension, or it can be atherosclerotic regions, or Marfan's Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or even traumatic in fact. Now, this is the mid-esophageal aortic valve long axis. You can see the dilated ascending aorta, the proximal and the mid portion. Important point to be noted here is you cannot make out which is the sinus and which is the sinoaortic blood junction and the where the ascending aorta starts. If that is the situation, the whole thing is dilated, the aortic root is dilated, then we call it as effacement of the aorta. This is the case, ideal case, which goes in for a Bentall's procedure. Either because here there is definitely there is malcoaptation of the aortic leaflets, This is the patient will go in for a Bentals with not a valve sparing one. Valved conduit has to be placed. This is an ideal case for a Bentals procedure. Okay, and you can make out the color flow Doppler in the dilated ascending aorta. Now here, if you see the mid-esophageal RV inflow-outflow view, the right coronary cusp, there is outpoaching of the sinus of the right coronary cusp. If you can see, it is protruding into the RVOT and causing an obstruction in the RVOT, in the right ventricular outflow tract. And you can see the spontaneous echo contrast in this outpoaching, in this aneurysmal portion of the ascending aorta. Okay. The thing here, what I want to stress here is to assess the aneurysms or atherosclerosis or anything for that matter, please do not rely on a single image. You have to do multiple image viewing for us to understand the nature and the pathology of this lesion. Now, important point is we have to measure all the what is the aortic annulus, the sinus, the sinotubular junction. If you see here, the ascending aorta is about 8.6 centimeters. Okay, in the mid-esophageal ascending aortic long axis view, you can make out it is about 6 centimeters here. This is a different patient, of course. Okay. Now coming to the types of aneurysm, thoracoabdominal aneurysms. It is known as a Crawford classification. On the right, you are seeing a thoracic aneurysm which is being opened. Actually, you have Crawford 1 to type 1 to type 4. Now, Crawford type 1 will be below the left subclavian to the diaphragm, just above the diaphragm. That is type 1. Then type 2, of course, will involve the abdominal part. Type 3 is below the, much below the, just above the diaphragm, up to extending up to the bifurcation of the iliacs. And type 4 will be totally an abdominal portions. These are the types of aneurysms, the thoracoabdominal aneurysms. Okay. Now, what are the surgical indications for these aneurysms? First thing is aneurysm should be twice the diameter of the normal aorta. 1. Okay. Sinuses has to be more than 40 millimeters. Normal value of the sinus would be about say about 35 or something. Okay. Ascending aorta more than 50 millimeters if they are involved with aortopathy, and more than 6 centimeters without aortopathy. Okay. Especially patients with connective tissue disorders, and also having a strong family history of aortic aneurysms or symptomatic patients should be considered for early operative therapy, because the risk of dissection is very high, or rupture also is very high in these individuals. Now, how do you use the TE? TE, we should use the TE to define the size, location, and extent of the aneurysm, whether there is hematoma or a thrombus in this, and you need to identify the type of aortic valve disease, which will help the surgeon in formulating a surgical plan. Okay, and also, like I said, we need to evaluate the patency of the aortic arch branches to confirm the presence of any organ malperfusion or not. That is about the aneurysms. After the surgical part, I'm not going into the details of surgical part. Only this thing I'm involving only the evaluation of the aneurysms by transesophageal echo. Next is the dissection. Now, if you classify, there is a Stanford classification. Now, the latest classification is you have Stanford type A and type B. Okay, type A will involve the whole of the ascending aorta down to the bifurcation, and type B will involve only the just below the subclavian artery, left subclavian artery, down to the bifurcation of the iliacs. This type A and type B. Now, important point here would be, if it's type A, it is a surgical indication. Type B, usually they manage it medically. Now, how do you say there is a dissection? First thing is, an intimal tear has to be present, which will have two lumens, a true lumen and a false lumen. Okay. Now, the false lumen may extend into the branches of the aorta in the chest or the abdomen, causing malperfusion, ischemia, or occlusion, in fact. Okay. And also they can progress proximally, involving the aortic sinuses, leading to an gross AR. Okay. Sometimes in 10 to 20% of the individuals, they may involve the coronary arteries, resulting in ischemic episodes. The most common cause of death is mortality is very high in these patients. Actually, if you look at it, is at the rate of 1% every hour during the first 48 hours. So hence, if you get a dissection, it has to be taken up as an emergency and surgically operated. Now, how do you diagnose this? MRI or TE? If you look at the specificity and the sensitivity of MRI, CT scan, and TE, it is 98% with all the three methods. Okay, if there is no emergency, the patient is stable, then probably you can subject him for MRI or a CT. Otherwise, if the patient is unstable, please remember that TE is the answer for an immediate operative procedure, because because the unstable patient, shifting him to an MRI room or a CT scan room is very, very tricky, because you might land up with some cardiac arrest during the transferring of the patients to the MRI rooms. TE would be an ideal this thing. In an emergency, you can intubate him and do a TE. And within 5 minutes, you can come make a diagnosis, know the extent of the dissection, involving the structures, whether it's the coronary arteries are involved, the aortic arch branches are involved. You can accomplish within 5 minutes if you are a very able echocardiographer, and take him to the operating theater as soon as possible. Now, if you look at the mortality is about 72% with medical management and 32% with surgical management. Okay, like I have already said, surgery is recommended for type A dissections and medical management for type B. But if you look at the mortality rates, it is same for whether it is type A or type B. Now, what are the features of dissection? When do you say it is dissection? First thing is that has to be a intimal flap, which will compromise a true lumen and a false lumen. Okay. Second most important point is there will be a forward systolic flow in the true lumen, or if it's a late event presenting a patient, there may be complete thrombosis of the false lumen. Okay. And because there is dissection of the intimal area, there will be displacement of the intimal area into the true lumen. That is known as central displacement of the calcified intimal area. Now, what is our job by doing a transvagal echo? First thing is we have to locate the intimal tear site. From where is it arising? Because we have to plug the intimal tear site, origin of the intimal tear site, to prevent further extension of the dissection flap. Okay, and we have to resect the primary site, wherein thereby decreasing the incidence of complications and redo surgeries. Okay. Usually the intimal tear will occur in the ascending aorta 1 to 3 centimeters above the right or the left sinus of Valsalva in about 70% of the cases. Okay, and in about 30% of the cases it will occur at the site of the ligamentum arteriosum, that is just at the region of the isthmus or the just above the left subclavian artery. Now, this is another image you can see here in the descending aorta. You can see the intimal flap here. It is oscillating with each cardiac cycle. Okay. Now, if you see here, the true lumen, how do you identify the true lumen is it expands during systole. Okay. That is why I'm trying to, we have to have a running ECG below in the image, each image. Please do not record any images without any running ECG, because many a times I've seen most of them doing echocardiography without any ECG leads in place. Please don't do that, because we cannot know whether it's systole or diastolic phase of the cardiac cycle. Okay. Now the true lumen is always smaller than the false lumen. Okay. And if you see, because of the forward systolic flow, the intimal flap expands towards the false lumen. So the area which is below the expansion will be the true lumen, and the opposite to that is the false lumen. Okay. And this can be diagnosed by placing an M-mode echocardiography. Okay. Now in the false lumen, you can see there is a spontaneous echo contrast or a thrombus can be seen. Okay. Now this is a three-dimensional view. If you see the intimal flap here, this is a beautiful intimal flap. Okay. Now this is the true lumen. Okay. And this is your false lumen, what we are seeing here. Okay. This is a three-dimensional beautiful image of the descending aortic view. Now another thing, type A dissection. If you can see here, there is a, if it is the flap is arising from the right coronary sinus of Valsalva and the left coronary sinus of Valsalva, and if you see the intimal flap is prolapsing into the left ventricular outflow tract, keeping the aortic valve in open in diastole, leading to a gross AR. You can see down below, you can see the intimal flap is prolapsing into the LVOT. In the short axis view, you can see the dissection flap oscillating, and you can see here the intimal flap which is moving in and out with each cardiac cycle. Now, most important point is you have to assess, okay, for the involvement of the coronary arteries. Important. In the long axis view, of course, you can make out the right coronary artery origin here, or in the short axis view, you can see you can withdraw the probe until the point of disappearance of the aortic valve leaflets. I can see that this is the left main artery. Here you can see the dissection flap is not involving the origin of the left main. Okay. In fact, in this view, in the short axis view, you can see both the left main and the right coronary artery. You can see here. Here, the dissection flap is not involving the coronary arteries. Actually, in 10 to 20% of the individuals, it does involve, which requires repair and also a coronary bypass to be done in these individuals if the coronaries are involved. This is a dissection flap in the aortic arch. You can make out in the distal aortic arch. Now, if you see here, now the dissection flap, the flap's intimal flap is involving the brachiocephalic artery. Okay, and here you can see it is involving the mouth of the left common carotid artery. Here, of course, this involves surgical correction by debranching. Okay, now dissection involving the descending aorta. See, this is the early part. You can see this is what you can see the flap moving with each cardiac cycle, and there is color flow on both the sides. It means it is a very early we have picked up the dissection. Probably that is why there has been no time for the thrombus to form or a sac to appear in the false lumen. This is the true lumen, and this is your false lumen. The bigger lumen is the false lumen. Okay. Now, like I said, if you go to the descending aortic long axis view and put an M mode across, you'll see there is a forward displacement of the intimal flap. You can make out now, and the area below this thing is the true lumen, and the forward movement of the flap is the area of the false lumen. The arrow indicates the true lumen, and the opposite to that is the false lumen. Okay, that means that because of the forward flow in the true lumen, the intimal flap moves towards the false lumen. Now, type B dissection, you can see this is a true lumen and this is a false lumen. You can see thrombus formed, and you can see sec there. Now, here I have measured this is true lumen and this is a false lumen. Okay. Now, especially in these individuals, okay, sometimes if the flap is involving multiple vessels or down into the descending aorta up to the iliacs, probably we have to adopt a hybrid approach for these surgeries. That is, the open surgical technique is combined with the endovascular repair or endovascular stenting, which will have the benefit of complete repair simultaneously, but reducing the risk of open technique. That means we have to do the initial repair in the theaters, then wheel him into the cath lab, or if you have a hybrid cath lab, wherein we can operate in the same theater or in the hybrid lab and do the endovascular stenting in the same sitting. Now, a very short note on the endovascular stenting. It is useful in aortic pathologies, especially in transection of the aorta or aorta bronchial fistulae. Okay. In aneurysms, the goal of the stent is to exclude the aneurysmal sac so that further dilation and disease progression is prevented. So, now why do you use TE in these individuals, especially in endovascular stenting? It is valuable to verify the pathologies, to know the site of the intimal tear, identify the true lumen, false lumen, to guide the stent placement, to detect the presence of endoleak after endovascular stenting, okay, and to detect any obstructions after post endovascular stenting. That's why transvaginal echo is very, very useful in these endovascular stents. Now, important benefit of transvaginal echo, especially while doing endovascular stenting, is to know or to visualize and direct the position of the guide wires. Okay, because we have to see the guide wires when you pass it from below, from the lower limbs. We have to see the guide wires in the true lumen, not in the false lumen. Because if you see the guide wires in the false lumen and try to put in a stent, you're going to obstruct the true lumen. So we have to be very, very sure that the guide wires are seen in the true lumen only. So it is critical for the guide wire of the delivery system to be placed within the true lumen, like I said. Now I'll show you an image here. This is the descending aortic short axis view. You can see this is the false lumen. I can see the color flow Doppler in the true lumen. And you can see the two guide wires being placed there. So here you can be sure that the guide wires are in the true lumen, and probably it is very safe to dilate or place the endovascular stent in place. So this is very important for us to see a good color flow Doppler and the guide wires being seen in the true lumen. I hope everybody can make out the spontaneous ego contrast in the false lumen. Now I am showing you another image. Already a graft has been placed. Okay, and you can see the color flow Doppler down below on the left side. Okay, and opposite to that you can see the sec there. Okay, on the false lumen side. Here also you can make out the sec down below. This is the false lumen and the endovascular stent. This is a long axis of the descending aorta, and stent has already been placed. Now, one point I want to make it very clear here is, now once the stent has been placed, okay, in the true lumen, and the false lumen, the clot or the sec in the false lumen should not move, it should remain static. If it is moving still after endovascular stent placement, if it is moving, it is not silent, if it is not static, that means there is a endovascular leak. I hope I am clear. The presence of movement of the sect in the false lumen indicates an endovascular leak or an endo leak. Okay. If it is quiet, then there is no leak, then it is a very successful placement of the endovascular stenting. Now here you see on the right hand side, there is movement of the spontaneous echo contrast. That means there is some form of endovascular leak. Now here, you can see here. Now here, if you see, there is no movement in the false lumen. You can see I am done going to the abdominal aorta. I am advancing it further and further. You can see the endovascular stent in place. Okay, down below after the abdominal aorta. Okay. Now, like I said about the leaks, it is characterized by persistent blood flow within the false lumen in 20% of the patients. Okay, there are two types of leaks: primary and secondary. Primary endo leaks are detected within 30 days. Secondary after 30 days. Okay. Now, T is more sensitive than angiography to detect endovascular leaks because it relies on a fixed volume of contrast to circulate within the endo leak. Smaller leaks may be overlooked because of the volume of the contrast, may not be detected by fluoroscopy. Hence, T is more sensitive to detect endo leaks rather than angiography. Okay. Like I said, most endo leaks can be detected by color flow Doppler. Okay. Now, the color flow Doppler scales needs to be reduced in order to visualize low flow leaks. Like I said, contrast that swirls or moves around the sacs may indicate the presence of an endo leak, while a static contrast indicates no movement, suggesting the absence of endo leak, like I've already told you before. Okay. Now, this is a post-deployment stent. You can see the stent here, and this is moving. There is a leak there. Okay. Now, here also, you can make out the swirling of the spontaneous echo contrast. This is the 3D image of the stent. You can see the movement of spontaneous echo contrast. That means there is definitely leak in this aortic arch. Okay, this is post stent deployed on the left side. There's movement in the false lumen. Okay, now here, if you see, you can see the color flow here. It is coming into the false lumen. This is the true lumen, and this is the false lumen. There is definitive movement of the spontaneous echo contrast in the. It is not static. I have shown you by a color flow Doppler that there is a definite leak. This was the patient which we had done a hybrid procedure, and we had to put a stent in a stent. Okay, we had put double stents to plug this endo leak. So what happens is if you leave these patients with an endo leak, they tend to form another aneurysm or the worsening of the patient's condition may happen in these. Hence, endo leaks have to be plugged in as soon as possible. Now, if you look at the complications of dissection, you'll have dissection can lead to about 50 to 70% of aortic insufficiency. Coronary dissections, like I said, in 10 to 20% of the cases, they can have pleural or pericardial effusion. Now, important point to be noted here is, if there is a pericardial effusion, you can definitely categorize that patient to be a type A dissection. And if there is a pleural effusion, you can categorize it as a type B dissection. And of course, because of the involvement of the coronaries, they can have global left ventricular dysfunctions. Most important point while ruling out dissections is you have to rule out the artifacts. Okay, you can rest be assured that there have been instances where patients have been taken into the theaters, opened up, aorta has been opened to find that there is no dissection, but basically it was an artifact. So please remember, don't take it lightly. We have to rule out the artifacts. Now, how do we differentiate between artifact and this thing? The top is actually a dissection. Down below, you can see in the ascending aorta, there is an artifact which is moving. First thing is artifacts, like below, if you see the borders are not distinct, but on the top you can make out distinct borders. But on the top, there are rapid oscillatory movements with each cardiac cycle, but down below, the oscillatory movements with each cardiac cycles are not present. Okay. And in the artifact area, if it's suspected, you can put a color flow Doppler. You'll see on both sides of the artifact, color flow Doppler will be seen in both sides. But in a case of a dissection, you will see only color flow Doppler in the true lumen, but not in the false lumen. So please remember to evaluate the presence of a true dissection and evaluate whether it's a true artifact. Now, suppose the commonest artifact which is seen is, suppose you have placed a Swan-Ganz. Usually the Swan-Ganz which is in the RV will be reflected as an image in the ascending aorta. So in those situations, if you think this is a dissection, the best answer would be, when in doubt, pull the swan out. If you pull out the swan, probably that the artifact in the ascending aorta disappears. This is one of the methods which has been recommended very strongly. Next is, apart from dissections, and thickening of the aortic wall without the presence of an intimal flap, it is termed as an intramural hematoma. Okay, that means the ascending aorta or the descending aorta, the walls are thickened, like my arrow is showing towards the wall. If it is thickened aortic valves, no intimal flap. Okay, and the now if you look at the indications, hematomas of the ascending aorta need surgery, descending aorta can be managed medically. So this is but thing is, if these intramural hematomas are detected, you can give them a short period of about 6 months, because most probably if the descending aortic thickening is more than 15 mm, okay, 1.5 centimeters or 15 millimeters, that time the chances of later development of dissections rate is very high. They need to be taken up for surgery, because later on presence of an aortic dissection is very high. Another common feature of especially in patients with the hypertension, hyperlipidemia, is the presence of a giant penetrating ulcer. Now, this is the descending aorta. If you can see, there's perforation of the intimal layer with a small ulcer-like situation. The arrow is pointing towards that. You can see the color flow going into the ulcer area. On the right-hand side, if you see, the yellow arrow is pointing towards the penetrating ulcer, and there is a 3D on the right-hand side. Okay. Progressive penetration may result in an intramural hematoma and aneurysm, and later on a flap can be raised and dissection can happen. These are all emergency surgical procedure for these patients. Actually, for ulcers, you need best is to put them on, take them into the cath lab and put a endovascular stent. Now, deceleration injuries, due to accidents, the commonest, especially because of the whiplash injuries. If you see this thing, usually the injuries occur at the region of the ligamentum arteriosum, okay, at the point of isthmus, just distal to the left subclavian artery. The whole of the aorta can get transected. The aorta gets ruptured. Okay. You see this image. Actually, to tell you the truth, this is one of my friend's cousin while driving on a Kuala Lumpur highway, met with an accident because he was speaking to his wife on the phone, and whole of the spinal cord has been transected. Okay, this is very common to have deceleration injuries. Okay, like I said, transection of the aorta. If you see here, this is very important. Transections, the best way to do it is to do a stent here. Stent has been placed post stenting. Okay. Now, to wrap up this topic, T is a very valuable imaging modality in the management of all aortic pathologies, and definitely I would say it has, to a very large extent, improved the patient outcomes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Patil, for that excellent presentation on aorta and assessment using transesophageal echocardiography. It was well done. You dealt with the commonly used transesophageal views. So you also mentioned about anatomy, grading of atheromata, then the types of dissection, and you mentioned about thrombus ulcers. And the most important thing which I would like to stress is that which you also mentioned is about the role of artifacts which may confuse or give misleading information. Uh, and uh, and you mentioned about the injuries to the aorta, transection injuries. Thank you for that. Excellent. I think you have covered most of the thing in the given short period of time. And we will look into the chat box and see if there are any questions. And I invite comments and questions from the audience.
Hi, this is Dr. Kanin here. This is a
Yes,
comment to
madam. Yes, madam.
Dr. Patil. Excellent presentation, Dr. Patil. Within the given time,
Yes.
everything has been covered. I really enjoyed your talk. I'm looking forward to another book followed, which you did before with the TED. Are you making another
Yes.
book, or are you going to add these to that book as well?
Dr. Patil, can you reply to that? Dr. Patil, are you there? Dr. Patil, Rajiv, has he logged off? Dr. Patil, are you there? There's a question directed to you. I think one of the participants, I don't know who it was, commented that you have done very well, which I agree.
It's
And
me,
the question
Dr.
was,
Muralidhar, Geeta.
oh, Geeta, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. She wanted to know that are you coming with the second edition of your booklet? Dr. Patil, can you listen to me? Can you hear me? Rajiv? In the meantime, anybody wants to comment on the content of the talk, please feel free.
Good morning, Dr. Muralidhar, sir. I'm Dr. V. Kumar from Delhi, sir.
Yeah, tell me.
Sir, if the patient comes, is it better to do TTE through suprasternal to diagnose rather than
We will ask
TE?
Patil 1 minute. Let him reply, then I'll add whatever points I would like to say.
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Patil? Dr. Patil, you have to unmute yourself. Please unmute.
No, yes, sir.
Ask questions. Please reply
Yes,
the
sir.
question. There are several questions for you.
Yes, sir.
See, one is TTE with suprasternal views vis-a-vis TEE views.
Pardon,
That's
sir.
one question.
So can you come again? I didn't understand.
One question was TTE using suprasternal views.
Yeah.
Versus TEE for aortic pathology.
Sir, no, sir, suprasternal views are very, very limited, sir. Visualizing the aorta is very, very difficult with the suprasternal views. Only a portion of the descending aorta and the aortic arch may be visible, but TE is a much better option than transthoracic echo. Especially in presence of dissections, hematoma is present. The windows may not be good on a transthoracic view. Transesophageal views are definitely much better
I
than
agree.
transthoracic.
I agree with that. Thank you for that. And the next question is, what is the threshold for Bentall procedure in patients who have bicuspid valves?
Sir, if it's a bicuspid valve, then better to do a valved conduit, especially in this thing. If you have a dissection
No,
involved.
threshold. The thing is, they are asking the threshold. I think Dr. Sanjeevani, can you please unmute and ask your question, Sanjeevani, directly to him? Dr. Sanjeevani? Yeah.
Excellent presentation by Dr. Patil. He has really taken.
You have to come closer to the mic and speak loudly.
Hello, can I?
Yes, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
better.
See, excellent presentation, Dr. Patil.
Thank you.
About this, it is dilemma whether to.
I can't hear you.
Hello.
We can't hear. The question is about the threshold. Is it same for patients who have bicuspid valve vis-a-vis no bicuspid valve?
Sir, if it's a bicuspid valve, the threshold has to be very low. Better to operate.
It is reduced. It is reduced in the
Yes.
bicuspid valves 4.5 itself. You must start thinking about.
Because lower the dilatation, earlier the surgery for them, because chance of dissection in them is very high.
Okay.
Correct. correct. They have some sort of iotopathy, which makes them vulnerable to aneurysms.
Yeah.
And if you only replace the valve and don't do anything for the aneurysm, they will develop aneurysm, bigger aneurysm later at a later date. So the threshold
Yes,
is
sir.
lower for the patients who have bicuspid
Lower,
valves.
yes, yes. That's what.
Yeah. The other question is, how do you differentiate between intramural hematoma and abscess?
And
Abscess.
Aortic
Abscess.
abscess. Aortic abscess.
aortic abscess. Sir, see, aortic abscess is very typical presentation is they'll be very toxic, high grade fever. Okay. They may have some associated ER. Intramural hematoma may not present with any fever. Clinically, they appear all right, except for some shooting back pain may be there. That's all. Otherwise, when you put in a color flow Doppler, especially in abscess, you can see the color flow moving in and out of the aortic root abscess, especially. For intramural hematoma, it's just thickening of the aortic wall. That's all. It will be about, say, 1 centimeter or something.
The other question is, can you see exit point in dissections?
No, sir, it's very difficult to make out. If it's down below, we are not able to make out because we'll see only some portion of the descending aorta, but not the lower portion of the abdominal aorta. We cannot make out the exit point. And we don't have to really bother about the exit point because once you plug the entry point, the beginning point of the intimal tear, and then the flow resumes in the true lumen, probably that gets plugged automatically. If it is too huge this thing, then we have to go in for endovascular stenting.
Correct. I agree with that. The other, I just wanted to ask you two questions. One is regarding two patients you have shown. One patient at grade 5 asthma.
Yes, sir.
Patient was posted for MVR and CABG. Only CABG was done.
Yes, sir.
What happened to the mitral valve lesion later on?
Which one, sir? No, sir, it remained moderate only.
Okay.
It remained moderate because that was actually extending from the mid ascending aorta up to the even the aortic arch was involving. So we didn't want to take any chance. We just did a total arterial revascularization, left it off, and even after 2 years he came back. The MR remained moderate only, but there was no worsening of the symptoms. We left it at that. This was in earlier days.
Yeah, that's good. Actually, the other question I wanted to ask is, you had a patient where there was aneurysm protruding into the RVOT.
Yes, sir.
Is it the aneurysm of sinus or valsalva in that case?
Yes, sir. You're right. It's the right coronary sinus of valsalva which is protruding in the RVOT.
Right. The other question is, abdominal aorta is better to see by TTE as compared to TTE. Abdominal aorta. This is the question.
Pardon, sir?
Abdominal aorta is better seen by TTE as compared to TEE.
Yes, it is right.
Question mark.
No, it is better seen by transthoracic rather than transesophageal.
Sir,
any other questions? Yes.
Hello, good morning, sir.
Yeah.
How are you going to identify the acquired dissection, iatrogenic dissections?
No, if it is acquired iatrogenic, immediately you will know on the table. Immediately. See, I think you have to do a transesophageal echo before going. Suppose you are doing a case of pump or something, or any surgery without pump also. If you are doing it before starting the surgery and after the end of surgery, you have to do the same all views. What I would suggest is you do all the complete 20 views before and after at the end of surgery. If it's an iatrogenic dissection, definitely you will know after the surgery is completed. Like, for example, I'll tell you, we were doing a young lady ASD. A junior guy was doing an ASD while doing the cannulation. He finished ASD closed. While coming off, we came off pump and I did all the 20 views. Then we saw in the descending aorta there is an intimal flap because while placing the aortic cannula, the posterior wall of the aorta had perforated and caused an intimal flap. So immediately we had to close the intimal flap then and there because it was arising just at the region of the aortic arch. So iatrogenic dissection can be recognized instantaneously.
The next question is, why there is pleural effusion in this section?
No, sir, the thing is, especially, see, what I said was pleural effusion usually in the type B dissections you have. Type B, Stanford type B you have. There what happens is, there will be, what is it? effusion, which is taking in the commonest region available for them space would be a pleural side, pleural space, because either the left or the right side. That's why the effusion will occur there. In the type A, what happens is the space available is only in the pericardial space. That's why you tend to have a pleural effusion. That's why it is recognized that pericardial effusion is a sign of type A dissections, and type B, you will have a pleural effusion.
So, where could we get your book? How could we get your book?
Ma'am, you just call me. You have my numbers. I will send it to you by courier. Not a problem.
I don't have your
chat box. I'll put it in the chat box.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you can get the number for anybody, ma'am. No problem.
I'm putting it in the chat box.
Okay, ma'am.
This is an Indian
How do
number.
we can you send number to the because I don't know how to get it from the chat box.
But ma'am, I couldn't understand you.
Can you put it on the WhatsApp group?
Yes, ma'am. On the FCA group, I'll put it up. My number.
The tea enthusiastic group.
Yeah.
Enthusiastic group. I'm not a member on the tea enthusiastic group.
But we need your number so that
I just said put it in the chat box. If you open the chat box, you'll get it. Will put it in the tea enthusiastic group also. Certainly. And I think that's all in the chat box now.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm unable to see it. So you please send it to me.
Yes. We'll put it in the enthusiast group.
Yeah, thank you.
Abnormality of AML seen aneurysm with ectasia.
Pardon, sir?
Last question of the day. Abnormality of AML seen in aneurysm with ectasia.
Sir, I don't know. I have not seen a abnormal anterior mitral leaflet, I think.
Sanjeevani, please reply to that question.
Hello, can you?
Yeah.
With dilatation of annular side, there is elongation.
I'm not able to hear you, ma'am.
We can't hear you. You'll have to be loud and come closer to the mic, please.
Hello, are you able to? Hello.
No, ma'am, we can't hear you.
Okay, I'll write it in the chat box.
Okay.
In type B dissection originating below subclavian.
Yes, sir.
Making a rent in the flap help in decompression of the false lumen.
Yeah.
Question mark there. Please reply to this.
Sir, can you repeat the question, sir? Sorry.
See, the question is in type B dissection.
Yes, sir.
Below the level of subclavian.
Yeah.
Will making a rent in the flap help to decompress the false lumen?
No, I don't think that should be done, or I don't think it's possible. Why should you make a rent in the false lumen? Best is, especially for the stenting, would be an answer for that.
Yeah. There is elongation of the AML with flutter in annulo-aortic ectasia. That is the reply for that.
Okay.
And thank you for this. I think I don't see any other question here. Thank you for this wonderful session, Dr. Patil, and all the audience and participants. Thank you very much, sir. Again. Yeah. You will meet again on Sunday for TE.
Yeah.
And cardiac anesthesia update on Monday at 7 p.m. If you're free, please join us.
Yeah. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rajiv.